entertainment is the green zone, which can be found on the screens in front of you. From the greenery of my home to the vast mysteries of the great outdoors, there's so much in this natural world to explore. And if you have something green to share, let me know in the comments below.
Hello everyone, welcome back or welcome to the HeyEunziverse. I noticed that I didn't have a video scheduled last week, and instead of adding something last minute, I decided to just take a break. So I hope that everyone had a wonderful week, and I'm back today with an interim check-in on the things I planted in the Hello Spring video. If you haven't watched that yet, I'll have a card above and a link below. Let's get some of the bad news out of the way first. The mint, lettuce, basil, oregano, rosemary, chiapolini red onions, and Asian chive seeds never sprouted. I waited about 2 months, which is 4 to 5 weeks longer than any of those should take to sprout, and still nothing. The spinach seeds did give me 1 sprout, but it didn't make it. Similarly, a small handful of the bunching onions seemed to have started to sprout, but nothing made it to maturity. 4 months, the eggplant seeds also didn't sprout, so I have since reused the soil for something else. But I noticed that I have sprouts now from that soil, so once they're big enough, I'll be replanting them and growing them out to see if they're the missing eggplants. There's also some, shall we say, uncertain news as well, but I'll sprinkle that in as we go through the successes. In the rabbit feeder tray, as I call it, the bok choy, cilantro, and kale are doing very well. The spot that I'm pointing to is where the bok choy used to be. They were already root bound in that spot, so the whole thing came up as one block. I've since repotted the bok choy into a larger pot, but as it grows, I may have to upsize it one more time. I also started another tray of bok choy seeds, and those are also doing well. There's a bit of yellowing due to underwatering, but for the most part, they're thriving. Now, one of my favorites, the potatoes. All the potatoes I've planted for this year have at least grown into plants. However, as you can see with these, some of the plants don't look all that healthy. Also, something has been digging around in here and leaving holes, so that hasn't helped with the growth either. I experimented with the tiny extras I got in last year's harvest to see if they would still produce decent sized potatoes despite being so small. For the most part, the answer is yes, but the plants themselves are very weak and don't stay up well on their own. So even though it's too early to be harvesting, I decided to remove the questionable plants and harvest whatever I could. Going forward, I won't be using any tiny potatoes for future planting. The strength of these plants may also be attributed in part to some of them being grocery store potatoes. The Dutch baby, for example, which is the one I'm harvesting here, was one that had been in the pantry too long and started to sprout. So whether it's because it's too early to harvest, or it didn't get enough feed, or that it's a grocery store potato, the size of its offspring are barely a third of its original size. And that's just talking about the largest ones I gathered. The rest I uncovered are even smaller. I haven't researched this topic though, so this is purely my conjecture based on my observations. For anyone who hasn't grown potatoes before, the plant lets you know when it's ready to be harvested. Although you can see some yellowing and browning on the leaves of these plants I'm digging up, the plants for the most part were still green and growing. This means that they're still forming potatoes in the ground. In contrast, when they are done with production, the whole plant will die off and wither, and that's a gardener's cue to go rummaging for potatoes. It may seem harsh or wasteful to be eliminating these plants, and trust me, I debated just leaving them be or not for quite a while. But ultimately, I wanted to give more room, water, and nutrients to the plants that would yield a better harvest for me. The sweet potatoes I planted are to the left of these plants, and since I failed to get any last year, I'm hoping that being in a much bigger container will give me some sweet potatoes this time. And to the right are the new Adirondack Blues that I bought as seed potatoes this year. They are much larger, sturdier, and healthier plants than my experimental ones, so I want to give them more room as well. On this bunch I'm grabbing here, you can see a few of the original seed potato skins still attached at the base of the plants. There were also several instances where you can see new potatoes that were forming on the roots. I had a mixed bag of tiny experimental Dutch babies from last year's harvest and the one large Dutch baby I mentioned earlier. As you can see, I discovered its skin too as I was digging around. The worms were busy at work in decomposing it, so I left it in the soil. Looking at it now, the larger potatoes I harvested are probably thanks to the large Dutch baby, whereas the smaller ones are probably from the smaller source potatoes. Now I'm moving into mini potato territory. These red ones were originally small and surprisingly yield potatoes that are comparable in size to the original seed potatoes. I was surprised to see so many potatoes attached at the base. It's definitely a case of small but mighty. Honestly, if you're tight on space but want the experience of growing potatoes, these mini potatoes are a great option. 2 years ago, I used store-bought mini potatoes and I harvested quite a bit. So if you're able to find them at your local grocery store, why not give them a try? As you can see, this seed potato was basically almost completely intact, so I'm guessing it had a lot more to give me. Unfortunately, it kept getting uncovered by whatever night guest has been visiting this potato box, so the plant was flopping over and I decided to let it rest for the season. Next year, I think I want to plant the mini potatoes in a canvas pot instead of mixing them with conventional sized potatoes. That way, I can keep an eye on them better and the little ones won't get lost in the shuffle. I didn't expect to be harvesting anything at the interim check-in, but it just goes to show that things in the garden don't always go to plan. But I'm happy with what I was able to gather, and I'm even more excited for when I harvest the rest of them. I gave the potatoes a good rinse outside and I let them air dry overnight before bringing them in. Because I didn't have the raised bed space and I got these seed potatoes a few weeks after planting the first set, these plants are in large canvas pots. The 25-gallon plants are leaning against the wall in this video because I had just turned the pot around to give the backside more access to sunlight. Moving on, we've got my mom's favorite, the cucumbers. Out of the whole box, of which I had covered in seeds, only this row in the front has made it to maturity. I think I mentioned that I was also battling with something munching on these seedlings that emerged towards the back. Unfortunately, I lost that battle. These plants have just started to produce flowers, so hopefully I'll be seeing the formation of cucumbers very soon. This sad looking situation is what I thought was going to be another failure, but after 2 months of nothingness, I noticed one little sprout starting to form. These are the repotted onions that are doing okay, except for these pesky aphids that I'm currently fighting. I had mentioned that the rosemary and oregano seeds didn't sprout, but the plants are doing amazingly. In the empty space where I hoped the rosemary seeds would grow, I instead planted this rosemary officinalis that I picked up on sale from Lowe's. It was interesting to see how different the foliage of each variety is when they're all next to each other. I personally love the look and smell of the Tuscan Blue the best, but I really enjoy all three. The hot and spicy oregano is still on its own, but maybe I'll add a pal soon. Next up, let's talk about peppers. I actually don't remember the order in which I placed all these pots, but this red tag is for sure jalapeno, and this blue tag that I thought was a failure gave me one Korean pepper sprout. This plant is the yellow hot pepper that wasn't shown in the Hello Spring video. I believe this one sprout here is the Korean green chili. These sprouts with the yellow tag is either mystery pepper 1 or no ID hot pepper. Neither white tag has sprouted, which would be sweet pepper or mystery pepper number 2, and the front yellow tag also hasn't sprouted. The honeycomb cherry tomato is growing strong and has been forming fruits. These are seriously delicious, so I can't wait. The yellow pear tomato that I planted as its companion had sprouted but never made it past that stage. As for the other tomatoes, they all sprouted and I went through each pot to sort through the seedlings. Again, it's kind of harsh and wasteful to remove the weaker seedlings, but there's only so many tomato plants I can have, and I want to only keep the strongest ones. From left to right, we have super steak, brandywine, 2 super sauces from different years, big rainbow, and black creme. After dealing with the tomatoes, I went after this pole bean. To my surprise, most of the seeds sprouted and I've been weeding out the weak ones in this pot as well. A lot of the leaves look pretty bad, so I went and trimmed a good chunk of them off. I also decided to move it into a less sunny spot. I thought this plant wanted full sun, but it might have been too much. The reason being that the leaves deep inside the pot that wouldn't get as much light look a lot healthier. I also added a bit more fertilizer in case that was adding to the issue of these unhealthy looking leaves. Hopefully it doesn't affect the growth of the beans. Speaking of which, little flower buds have started to form. I've only tried growing edamame once before with overwhelming failure, never having reached the flowering stage. So to witness these plants get this far is quite satisfying. As someone who is a massive fan of the legume family, I hope that I get to eat these. We've got this little okra plant that is hanging on for dear life. I'm not sure why it's so scrawny, but here we are. Next up, we've got my sad little peony patch. Those are either the Sarah Bernhardt or the Sorbet and Emile de Betine. Up in the front is one pot of double lactifloras from last year. Those are again either the Sarah Bernhardt or the Sorbet and Emile de Betine, and another pot of double lactifloras from last year in front of it. This is a pot of Festiva Maxima, which is definitely the healthiest of the peonies. I think the other pots didn't grow as well because they didn't get as much sun as this one did, so there's a lot of rearranging that needs to be done around here. This Hydrangea Nico Blue is hanging on, but the same can't be said of this common purple lilac. It produced leaves and branches several times, but all of them died off, and I'm not sure if it will make it. These calla lily bulbs are doing wonderfully, and my mom is happy that they are in fact colored as described. This little mixed pot wasn't in the Hello Spring video, but they are a bunch of different wildflower seeds that I got from my grandma. They seem to be struggling a bit to grow, but we'll see what happens. The loofah, I'm happy to say, is growing steadily as well. And last but not least, these edible chrysanthemum, known in Korean as sukkat, have been flowering. There are still several months left in the growing season, so stay tuned for our harvest video in the fall. If you're gardening right now, I'd love to know how things have been going for you. Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.
As we come in for a landing, Carnia and I hope you had as much fun as we did on today's adventure. Until next launch, let's stay connected.